And that video is the reason I chose the name Kaito for this character. I don't even like Vocaloid that much, it's just been stuck in my head for months now. Hey everyone, welcome back to Genshin Character Creator. This will be part 2 of my Electro-Charged special. Last episode we covered Arashi and my concept of making him an Electro-Charged DPS, or EC for short. This episode will cover the other end of the spectrum with Kaito. He will be our dedicated Electro-Charged buffer, similarly to Kaveh, Baizhu, or Nilou. You don't have to watch the previous episode to understand this one, but if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend checking it out after. Watching both of them will be necessary when we go into part 3's lore and team synergy episode. As always, disclaimers, timestamps, social media links, and music credits are down below. If you're ready, we can just jump right in. Since Arashi was an Electro unit, Kaito will naturally fill in the slot of Hydro to fulfill the EC requirements. He's going to be a polearm user, and this was chosen just because Candace is the only other Hydro polearm. I just wanted to make a second one. And yes, I know there's no Hydro Claymore yet, but I feel like a Hydro Claymore would be a DPS, not a support. He's going to be a 4-star character, and this was a decision I made from a gacha perspective. I forgot to mention this in Arashi's episode, but that character is meant to be a 5-star unit. Creating 2 characters intended to be paired up in a team is fine, but I thought it would feel a bit wrong if both of them were 5 stars, especially since both of them are meant to fill a specific niche. Because now, you'd be forced to spend extra wishes for a premium team. So the idea of making Kaito a 4-star allows both units to be in the same banner, which should be easier in terms of getting the duo. Also, making a Hydro 4-star fills up more of that roster since we only have 3 of them right now. His Ascension stat is going to be a 24% Hydro damage bonus. He's not a dedicated DPS as he's meant to be a support, but he's still going to have some damage potential. He's actually going to want to focus his build into a different stat, but because there's a lot of sources for said stat, I just gave him damage percent so I wouldn't be overdoing it immediately. Moving on to his actual abilities, Kaito will have a standard attack string for all of his basic attacks. I'm just going to move on because there's nothing special here. For his skill, let's start by discussing a stacking mechanic he has called Ripple. Whenever the active party member experiences HP loss of any kind, Kaito gains a Ripple stack, and he can have up to 5 of these. Stacks can be gained once every 0.3 seconds. This mechanic means he'll work a bit better with any character who can manipulate their HP. This can include the usual HP manipulators like Neuvillette or Wriothesley. You can also use Furina to drain the active character, and self-damaging characters like Dia can contribute stacks as well. Upon casting his skill, he will fire off a Hydro Shot, dealing AoE damage based on his max HP, and also, he creates a whirlpool, pulling enemies in. This whirlpool lasts for 0.5 seconds, and context-wise, it's a pretty slow pull speed. For every Ripple stack Kaito has, he will extend the whirlpool by 0.5 seconds, and the whirlpool deals an additional instance of damage identical to the skill cast. The ICD of these hits is a little different. It's purely based on hit count, and that count is 3. If the max hit count is 6, Kaito applies Hydro on the first and 4th hit of damage, so his skill isn't that good for Hydro application, but the damage multipliers are still pretty okay. Nothing DPS tier, of course. On top of that, he is one of the only non-animal units who has grouping potential. I believe that's the best part of his skill. Particle-wise, he will generate 4 Hydro particles, which is pretty good for a battery. It will have a 10-second cooldown, which means in longer rotations, you might be able to fire off a second shot for more particles and damage instances. For Kaito's burst, he erects a Hydro Tesla, which deals Hydro damage to enemies within an AoE. The Tesla will fire single target bolts at enemies within its radius. An enemy will get targeted every 1 second. It'll have a 16-second duration, a 20-second cooldown, and the burst cost will either be 80 or 90. The high cost will make sense in a little bit. The ICD on this ability will be 3 seconds or 3 hits, which is slower than most other Hydro characters. For his A1 passive, when casting his skill, he will grant the entire party a 15% max HP bonus for 12 seconds. Relatively simple, as it's just a nice buff for HP scaling characters. For his A4 passive, Kaito's energy recharge above 100% will increase the tick speed of Electro-Charge, up to a max of 100% tick speed bonus. In simple terms, you cap out the bonus at 200% ER, and the bonus itself will cause EC to tick at most double its original rate. EC normally ticks every 1 second, so this bonus allows him to tick every 0.5 seconds. When it comes to elemental auras, EC will deplete the Hydro and Electro auras when it ticks. With this particular buff, I'm intending for the increased tick rate to not affect the auras, so you don't have to worry about applying more Hydro or Electro just to maintain the EC aura. If you don't mind the specifics, we can just assume the consumption rate is the same at 1-second intervals. If you really need the mechanic to be addressed, then we can say that the aura will be depleted at an amount inverse to the tick rate bonus. So for example, if the rate is 2 times, or twice as fast, the aura depletes at an inverse, which is 0.5 times, or half as much. In other words, the aura will feel the same as usual. So that's it for its main kit, but because Constellations are more relevant on a 4-star, I'll cover this first and then we can get into its design overview. For C1, after hitting enemies with his skill, Kaito reduces their Hydro and Electro resistance by 15% for 8 seconds. When it comes to EC teams, a Hydro DPS and Electro DPS will benefit from this debuff, and EC damage is considered as Electro damage, which also benefits from the Electro Res Shred. At C2, when enemies within the burst radius take Electro-Charged damage, the Burst Tesla deals an instance of Hydro damage on that enemy, equal to 120% of its original multiplier. The Tesla can do this special shot every 2 seconds per enemy, which basically means that each enemy has their own internal cooldown for being targeted. This further improves Kaito's personal damage when running an EC team, since the shots are just extra damage sources. But on top of that, these special shots have no ICD, so the Constellation is also a massive buff to its Hydro application. For C3, his skill level increases by 3. Just a small damage buff to his skill, nothing special. For Kaito C4, while his burst is active, all party members gain 60 elemental mastery. The active character within the field's radius also gains a 16% skill damage bonus. This bonus improves the team's EM stat, allowing for slightly higher EC damage. It also provides a skill damage bonus, so any character who specializes in that category gains a nice personal damage bonus. The best characters are usually on-fielders, so this means units like Alhaitham, Navio, or Femine gain a skill damage buff. What's even better for these teams is that all of them can technically work with Electro and Hydro units. Alhaitham has Hyper Bloom or Quick Bloom, which does incorporate some EC damage. Navia can use a specific niche of like EC Crystallize, but it's not like the best for personal damage. And Femine uses Electro and Hydro for Freeze, Shatter, and Superconduct. I'm not really sure how present EC is for these teams, but it could work. And while it may not be the best option, you could play off-fielders in an on-field role, such as Farina, Yai, or Fischl, and this can still be an okay choice for improving their personal damage. For C5, his burst levels increase by 3. This buffs the damage of his Tesla, but because his C2 scales on the Tesla's multipliers, it also buffs the damage of his C2 damage. Finally, at C6, every 1% of Kaito's ER above 100% grants a 0.7% damage bonus to Electro-Charged damage triggered by party members. This further pushes Kaito into an ER scaling kit, but this will also double dip into boosting the actual reaction damage. For a bit of context on the numbers, having 250% ER grants a 105% bonus to EC damage. Now that I've covered his main kit, we can go into his design overview. His kit can still be used as a general Hydro support for any sort of non-EC team, so while he's wildly worse, he can still function in things like Freeze or Bloom. I think the only time you'd use him in those teams is maybe in like Imaginarium Theater, where he's your only Hydro option. When it came to his EC niche, the bar for reaction buffers is honestly pretty low. As of right now, we have Nilou, Kaveh, and Baizhu. Baizhu, in my opinion, is in the lowest standard for a buffer, and this isn't because his buffing is horrible, but more so that all that he has with it is the damage bonus. While Kaveh's execution in his kit is bad, he does have the ability to detonate cores early, which is technically a bonus in the reaction's properties. Meanwhile, Nilou is our gold standard for buffing because she completely alters how Bloom works, while also insanely buffing its damage output. When it came to Kaito, I wanted to make his buffing concept on the same level as Kaveh. His C6 provides a damage bonus, but he also provides some kind of effect to EC's properties. Not on the same level as Nilou, where it completely changes the reaction as a whole, but still something that feels unique. I associate Electro with energy and energy recharge for obvious reasons, but expanding out, Electro is just another way to say lightning. And something I associate with lightning is speed. So bringing the idea of speed to EC came in the form of tick rates. While most of the other reactions are a single hit of damage, EC is one of 2 damage over time reactions. This means it deals damage over set intervals. And when it came to buffing those abilities, increasing the rate at which dot abilities deal damage is one of those options. And that's how we got here. In addition to Kaito providing higher EC damage like any other reaction buffer, he also buffs it by making it tick faster. The fact that it's a dot reaction allows the buff to feel unique. Burning is the other dot reaction, but it already ticks once every quarter of a second, so the rate of damage is already super fast. This is why when I did my Asher video on burning buffing, I focused more on making the damage itself higher. And going back to my thought on associating Electro with energy recharge, it only made sense to have the tick rate bonus scale on that stat in particular. Energy recharge is also somewhat associated with speed, because the more you have, the faster your burst comes back. I'm pretty happy with the idea of how I buffed Electro-Charged. It works mechanically, it's original and new, and it makes sense from a thematic level, which I love doing. Let's move on to Kaito's builds, starting with his artifact main stats. Stacking ER is the easiest option since it guarantees an increase to his EC buffing. At a minimum, you should be going for 200% ER to guarantee the full buff on his A4 passive, and after that, any additional ER buffs will just only go towards his C6 damage. At some point, there will be diminishing returns, so you should go for a somewhat balanced stat pool. This means that if you have too much ER, an HP Sands can still serve as a viable alternative for its personal damage. For the Goblet, you can go for an HP or Hydro damage main stat. Hydro damage is his best option, but HP is a fine alternative, especially if you're running teams with massive damage percent bonuses. For the Circlet, crit or HP depending on your investment level. For substats, focus more on getting ER and HP as needed. EM is better as a secondary focus since it buffs his personal EC damage, and if you want more personal damage, crit is also a good option. For artifact sets, Emblem is generally going to be his best option. It provides ER as its 2-piece effect, and a burst damage bonus scaling with ER, which Kaito wants to stack up anyway. His burst is his main source of damage, so this pairs very well with him. Also, if you haven't pieced it together by his name, he's from Inazuma, so the set works from a regional lore standpoint. While not his best option, other sets are still okay. Thunder Soother has an effect that increases damage against Electro-affected enemies. EC's aura is Electro and Hydro, so this will work in Kaito's Taser teams. Cinder City is fine, but Kaito can only provide 12% elemental damage, not the full 40%. Besides, if you run him with Ororon, that guy already fills the Cinder City role. You can also run support sets like Noblesse and Deepwood depending on who your main DPS is. Going back to the beginning though, Emblem is going to be his best option 90% of the time. Moving on to weapon builds, he has choices between ER, HP, and EM polearms. Starting with ER, it's the best for providing higher EC buffing, along with allowing him to burst easier. Since he can run crit rate circlets without disrupting the rest of his kit, Favlands is easily one of his best options. The catch is also a good option if you go for more of a DPS build on him. For 5 stars, Skyward Spine is okay, but the passive on him kinda sucks. Meanwhile, Engulfing provides around 85% ER at R1, but its only downside is the fact that Kaito has no attack scaling, so that bonus is ineffective. When it comes to HP polearms, Black Tassel is a free-to-play option for its substat. Desert Sage also has this substat, but since Kaito has no healing, he can't use the weapon passive. But Rightful Reward is able to be utilized, due to it requiring the user to be healed. Finally, EM weapons aren't super amazing, since the EC reaction is shared throughout the team. This means Kaito might not always be the one owning the reaction, so it won't scale on his EM. Even still, I'd say Dragonbane's his best option. EC affected enemies are affected by Hydro, which procs the damage bonus. The other two options, Katane and Moonpiercer, are fine, but are general stat sticks. Let's move on to Kaito's signature weapon. It'll have a base attack of 454 and an ER subset of 61.3%. For its passive, when the user casts their burst, they grant the entire party 1 EM for every 2 to 1% of energy recharge they have above 100%. This lasts for 12 seconds. This weapon allows Kaito to provide his team with higher EM stats, allowing for higher EC damage to occur. This works really well since EC teams have issues with making sure a single character is the one owning the aura. Because the team shares the ownership, it's why characters like Sucrose work well in Taser, since she can team share EM. This weapon effectively does the same thing. By sharing EM, your units can focus more on personal stats, since the EM will come from an external source. Because of how simple the passive is, it works on any polearm and shines in ER-focused characters. Raiden, Toma, Xiangling, and Candace are good examples of this. Kaito in particular works best, just because he scales directly with the ER substat. And there's no capsules bonus either, so you can go crazy with stacking ER. But anyway, that's gonna do it for this part of the special. Once again, I really like my design for EC buffing. It's a powerful bonus that still feels unique from a design perspective. Part 3 will discuss Arashi and Kaito as a duo, including team discussions, kit design philosophies, and their backstory, so stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed, consider leaving a like and subscribing to support the channel. Let me know what you liked about his kit, what you would change, and any other ideas you might have. Thanks again for watching everyone, and I will see you in part 3. Bye!